multiple scripture readings. If you ever wanted to know where in the Bible you could find the line that says, love your neighbor as yourself, it's easy to do. Just close your eyes and open the Bible. You're probably going to land on it. So just listen up. So we'll start in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures. Leviticus 19:18. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 12, verses 30 to 31. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Romans 13:9. You shall not commit adultery, you should not murder, you should not steal, you should not covet, or any of the other commandments are all summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Galatians 5:14. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Gospel of Matthew 22:39. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. Now, I think the Bible makes it fairly clear that we're supposed to love our neighbor as yourself. This isn't just some random verse that's tucked in the back of the Bible somewhere. Open the Bible and just start reading. You're going to find it all over the place. But if we listen, we might notice something that is often overlooked in these verses. Not only does the Bible repeatedly tell us to love our neighbor as ourselves, but it adds a statement to many of these that often doesn't get read, or we just don't hear it when it is being read. But listen as I read a few of these again from the letter to the Romans. All of the commandments are summed up in this one word: love your neighbor as yourself. From the Gospel of Mark, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. In the Gospel of Matthew, on these two commandments, love your neighbor as yourself, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, hang all the law and the prophets. The Bible makes it clear that it's all about loving your neighbor as yourself. Even when we're reading other parts of the Bible that don't say this exact line, we need to realize that wherever we're reading, whatever we're reading, anywhere in the Bible, that all of the law and all of the prophets must be read through the lens of love your neighbor as yourself. When we read a scripture verse, sometimes that seems troubling, hateful, violent. I don't know if you knew, sometimes in the Bible it gets violent. Sometimes there is hate in the Bible. Sometimes there is troubling verses in the Bible. But whenever we're reading those verses, we need to remember that we were taught that all of the Bible is read through the lens of love, so we filter this and we understand this in a loving context. When someone else is waving the Bible in your face and quoting something to you and saying something that seems maybe hurtful, we must remember that the Bible makes it clear that there is no other commandment greater than love. Oftentimes when we're engaged in that difficult task of interpreting the Bible, you read it this way, but you read it that way, and we're trying to struggle. What is the correct interpretation? What is the best way to approach this passage that is interpreted in multiple different ways? Well, the Bible tells us that the theological interpretation that puts the command to love your neighbor as yourself above all else is the correct interpretation. Basically, if two people are interpreting a scripture verse in their radically different interpretations, the interpretation that is hurting someone is wrong. The interpretation that is loving someone is correct. It's that simple. Love your neighbor is a core value. But it's a core value not just found in Judaism in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, and a core value found in Christianity in the New Testament. We can find this core value to love your neighbor as yourself in many religions around the world. Buddhism says it this way: whatever is disagreeable to yourself do not do unto others. Confucianism says, always says, Confucius say, do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you. The religion of Islam says, none of you will believe until you love your brother for what you love yourself. Native Americans, from the big law of peace, respect every form of life. It is the foundation. Jainism, in happiness and sorrow, in joy and pain, we should consider every creature as we consider ourselves. Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not unto others that which would cause pain if done to you. And Gandhi, who was a Hindu himself, says this: to see the universe in the all-pervading spirit of truth face to face, one must be able to love the meanest of all creatures as oneself. Now, it's safe to say that a church like this here at Windermere Union Church, we place loving our neighbor as ourself as the pinnacle teaching of this church. We believe that loving our neighbor as ourself is the foundation of everything we do in this church. It seems so straightforward, doesn't it? It seems like a sentiment that everyone should be able to get behind. Who would disagree with loving your neighbor as yourself? But in reality, there's a lot of pushback on this statement. I've been in conversations with Christians, with other pastors, with lifelong Christians who are going, oh, well, you liberals keep on talking about that. And they downplay it and they push it down that it's a secondary thing in the Bible. They want to elevate their elitist theology, where a few who have the right belief will be saved. And this whole love your neighbor as yourself kind of goes in conflict with that. But it's not just these radical Christians who refuse to love their neighbor as themselves. Even loving, caring Christians who cherish the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself. Even these loving Christians often fail at truly loving your neighbor as yourself. I'm sure that even here in this congregation, there are many people whose faith centers on this statement. We champion it. We throw our hands in the air every time we hear it. Like, oh yes, love your neighbor as yourself. This is so great. But in reality, practicing that in the real world is not always easy. Why is that? Why is it that difficult to love your neighbor as yourself? The answer is found in those very words of the Golden Rule. Listen closely as I read it again. It's very simple. Love your neighbor as yourself. The key part there is as yourself. The Golden Rule presupposes you love yourself. What happens if you have low self-esteem? What happens if you're suffering from depression? What happens if the person you see every morning in the mirror is the one person that you can never fully accept in life? Now, with this new understanding and self-reflection, it's entirely possible to hate your neighbor and still live by the Golden Rule. We hate our neighbors as we hate ourselves. It's still possible to condemn your neighbor and still live by the Golden Rule. We condemn our neighbors as we condemn ourselves. It's possible to mistreat your neighbor and still live by the Golden Rule. We mistreat our neighbor as we mistreat ourselves. For if we do not love ourselves, how can we love anyone else? We're still loving our neighbor when we treat them poorly. Doesn't that sound weird? Loving our neighbor. Well, maybe we're loving our neighbor, but we're loving our neighbor as ourselves for treating ourselves poorly. if we look down on ourselves, if we mistreat ourselves. If we want to end the cycle of hate in this world, the first thing we need to do is learn how to love ourselves. In this polarizing world of ours, we often wonder, is it ever possible for a liberal Democrat to truly love a mega Republican? Could an Israeli today love a Palestinian or vice versa? And here's the more important one. Can a Florida Seminoles fan ever truly love a Gators fan? These are questions that we ponder in life. At the center of all these questions is that more fundamental question. Do you love yourself? Do you accept all of your flaws and shortcomings? Do you ever second guess who you have become in life? When people look down on themselves, they have a low value of who they are. They often try to raise their sense of self-worth by tearing others down. But this is simply a false illusion that's created. In this scenario, a person doesn't actually lift themselves up by demonizing others. We have a low opinion of ourselves, and so we tear others down, making it seem like we've elevated ourselves, but we haven't moved anywhere. We've just tore someone else down to make ourselves have the illusion of being higher. If we love others, we can only do that if we love ourselves. If we truly love ourselves, then yes, I believe it's entirely possible for a liberal Democrat to love a mega Republican, because we separate our humanity from our ideology. When we love ourselves, an Israeli can love a Palestinian. A Christian can love a Muslim. It's not about theology or politics or worldview. Love transcends all of these petty notions that we humans have created. True love is where the God in me sees the God in you. But this can only happen if I can see the God in me. This can only happen if you can see the God in you. Now, we're not going to end this sermon today by navigating ourselves back around to the big command of love your neighbor as yourself, because that's step 2. The truth is, most of us are not ready for step 2. Before we can love our neighbor as ourselves, we need to start by completing step 1. Do you love yourself? Do you completely accept who you are? Have you made peace with your past? Have you forgiven yourself for all of your wrongs? Now, maybe someday we'll get to step 2. Maybe someday I'll actually preach a real sermon on loving your neighbor as yourself. But as for today, let's stay focused on step 1. As we leave here today, honestly work on answering the more fundamental question. Do you love yourself? Amen.
Can I get an amen? Can I get an amen? If you can't love yourself, how in the hell you gonna love somebody else? Say amen.
Let's go forth in peace, truly loving ourselves, working on ourselves, accepting ourselves.